You need to pay attention, because you've been misled about who you were all along. You hold way more power than anyone knows. People called you soft, emotional, fragile, but that was never the truth. Your sensitivity wasn't a flaw, it was power wrapped in the wrong story. And the world learned to use that power against you before you ever learned to use it for yourself. Because here's the twist no one tells you. A healed empath isn't calm, gentle, or easy to handle. A healed empath is dangerous, not to the good, but to everything that feeds on chaos, manipulation, and emotional imbalance. When an empath heals, they have a drastic shift. They become the one thing people never expected. Empaths were never meant to be the quiet background characters. They were placed in the middle of chaos for a reason. You were the one born into unstable families, heavy rooms, conflict-filled relationships. Not because you were weak, but because you were the only one who could keep the energy from collapsing. You were the stabilizer, the hidden guardian, the one who could sense what others refused to see. But before you healed, you didn't know your purpose. You didn't know that people weren't drawn to your kindness. They were dependent on your balance. They used your energy to soothe their wounds while leaving you empty. But now, you're no longer the stabilizer who sacrifices yourself for everyone else. And the moment an empath steps into that role, everything around them begins to shift. Fast. Before healing, an empath often clings to anything that feels familiar. Relationships, friendships, even situations that drain them, simply because the idea of being alone felt worse than the cost of staying. They were constantly trying to save people, hold everything together, and avoid abandonment at all costs. But once an empath heals, something extraordinary happens. The fear of being alone disappears, and in its place rises a quiet inner strength that surprises even them. A healed empath doesn't chase, doesn't cling, and doesn't beg for a space in anyone's life. Their sense of self becomes so solid that aloneness no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like a sanctuary. It's where they think clearly, where they regenerate, where they grow sharper, wiser, and more rooted in who they are. Solitude becomes their source of clarity instead of their source of fear. This is the stage where their power becomes undeniable. Because when an empath walks alone by choice, rather than by abandonment, they move differently. They move intentionally. They move with direction, with purpose, with an inner compass that no longer sways with the emotions of others. Healed empaths don't walk with a crowd, they walk with their conviction. Their solitude is not quiet, it is concentrated. It is the reason they begin to make decisions without hesitation, cut ties without guilt, and trust their intuition without second-guessing. They may walk alone, yes, but the way they move carries the weight of an entire army, and that's the part people never expect. Not everyone deserves a front-row seat to your life, and a healed empath finally knows that. One of the most dramatic shifts happens when an empath heals. Their standards rise in a way that feels almost shocking to people who once had unlimited access to them. They stop giving their time freely. They stop letting people close just because they asked. And they stop believing they owe their energy to anyone who wants it. Healed empaths don't build walls, they build entry requirements. They become extremely selective about who gets near their inner world. This isn't fear. This isn't bitterness. It's self-respect. They finally understand that access to their heart, their presence, their attention, and their peace is a privilege, not a right. And privileges must be earned. This shift changes everything. The empath who once over-explained now speaks in clarity. The empath who chased toxic validation now chooses alignment. The empath who tried to fix everyone now helps people in a way that doesn't break them in return. They still care deeply, but they no longer sacrifice themselves to prove it. This is the phase where a healed empath stops living reactively, putting out emotional fires, absorbing everyone's chaos, and starts living intentionally. They choose who sits close, who stays at a distance, and who doesn't get in at all. Their life becomes curated, not chaotic. And for the first time ever, they're the ones in control of the energy around them. Because when a healed empath sets the rules, the whole room feels it. Power means nothing if you can't be trusted to hold it. One of the most overlooked parts of an empath's transformation is how their past, the years spent in emotional survival mode, becomes their greatest advantage. While other people learned social cues casually, empaths learned them as a matter of survival. Every mood shift, every tone change, every micro-expression, it all became part of a subconscious database they built without even realizing it. And this isn't mysticism. This is pattern recognition forged through years of watching people too closely for too long. A healed empath becomes what many try to imitate, but few truly are: a human lie detector. They don't need proof, evidence, or long explanations. Their perception automatically pieces together the emotional signatures, behavioral sequences, and tonal inconsistencies that reveal someone's intentions long before they ever act on them. They don't read minds, they read patterns, and their accuracy is unsettling. Healed empaths don't guess your truth, they notice it. This kind of perception could be used in extremely manipulative ways. They could pull strings, influence outcomes, or emotionally outmaneuver almost anyone if they wanted to. But here's the part that makes them truly powerful. They choose not to. They choose honesty, even when deception would be easier. They choose clarity instead of control. They choose integrity over shortcuts. This is where the healed empath steps into a rare form of authority, not because they can manipulate people, but because they consciously refuse to. They understand that real power comes from alignment, not domination. And the irony is that people always trust the empath who could manipulate but refuses to, because there's something undeniably magnetic about a person who has every tool to play the game but chooses to rise above it. The same people who once fed off your light now flinch when you speak. Something unexpected happens when an empath heals. The people who once drained them suddenly find themselves uncomfortable in their presence. It's not because the empath becomes aggressive or confrontational. It's because the emotional access they used to rely on disappears, instantly, almost shockingly, and the healed empath becomes someone they can no longer influence. A healed empath carries an energetic boundary that feels tangible. It's not defensive, and it's not toxic. It's simply undeniable. The moment they enter a room, people sense that things aren't as easy as they used to be. There's no more emotional supply to feed off of, no more cracks to exploit, no more desperate attempts to please. The empath's energy no longer bends for anyone, and that alone shifts the entire dynamic. Your presence becomes the warning. Manipulators can feel it before the empath ever says a word. Their tactics fall flat. Their little traps don't land. Their emotional hooks slide right off. And for the first time ever, they realize that the empath they once underestimated now sees straight through them and will not entertain them for even a second. Healed empaths speak once, and the room recalibrates, not because they're loud, but because their clarity cuts through everything that is false. There's a weight to their voice now, a confidence that comes from knowing they no longer owe anyone their energy. Their vibration does the work before their words do. It creates an atmosphere where only genuineness can survive. This is why the wrong people start avoiding a healed empath. It's not because the empath is harsh, it's because their presence exposes what others can no longer hide. And deep down, the ones who used to drain them know exactly why they can't get close anymore. The empath they once fed on has become the one thing they never expected, a force they can't drain, manipulate, or diminish ever again. You didn't change. You just stopped dimming your flame. One of the strangest things that happens when an empath heals is that the world suddenly becomes confused. People start saying things like, "You've changed," or "You're not the same person anymore," as if your evolution is an inconvenience. But the truth is, you didn't become colder. You became clearer. You stopped bending your emotions into the shapes people expected. You stopped softening your voice so others could stay comfortable. What they call cold is simply a version of you that isn't available for misuse anymore. The healed empath is often misunderstood because people were so accustomed to their compliance. When you were unhealed, everyone had access to you at all times, and you rarely questioned whether they deserved it. You offered warmth on demand, compassion on command, and emotional labor without limits. But once you reclaim your boundaries, the external world doesn't know how to interpret the shift. That's why healed empaths are often labeled as distant or detached, not because they lack emotion, but because they finally direct it with intention. You never lost your heart. You just stopped handing it to people who didn't know what to do with it. Empaths were never meant to be soft-spoken saints or emotionally fragile ornaments. They were meant to be powerful, emotional forces, capable of deep feeling, clear judgment, and unstoppable inner strength. The healed empath becomes assertive without aggression, confident without arrogance, and selective without guilt. They learn to carry their sensitivity the way fire carries heat, not to burn everything around them, but to maintain their own form. You're not cold, you're fire in control. People only feel the burn when they come too close with the wrong intentions. And the ones who appreciate warmth rather than exploit it begin to recognize what you truly are, a presence that illuminates without being extinguished. A healed empath becomes one of the safest people you can possibly encounter, and not because they're endlessly patient or unconditionally forgiving, but because their energy is grounded, consistent, and sincere. When they heal, their presence becomes a kind of emotional clarity that most people don't experience often. There is no hidden judgment, no quiet resentment brewing beneath the surface, no unspoken expectations you must navigate. Good people feel this immediately. They sense that they don't need to over-explain themselves, perform, or shrink to fit into the empath's world. The healed empath becomes a place where truth feels welcome. What makes this transformation so powerful is that healed empaths no longer listen through the filter of insecurity or emotional obligation. They hear people as they are, not as they need them to be. This allows them to offer something incredibly rare: pure presence. When someone speaks their truth, their real truth, the healed empath doesn't flinch, doesn't cling, and doesn't collapse under the weight of those emotions. They hold space in a way that makes honesty feel not only safe, but effortless. But the moment deception enters the room, everything changes. Manipulators, liars, or people who rely on emotional distortion feel the shift instantly. It's not because the empath becomes aggressive, It's because their energy is too clean to blend with anything false. Healed empaths create an atmosphere where authenticity is amplified and dishonesty is exposed without a single confrontation. A person with hidden motives can feel it in their chest, that subtle tightening that comes from being near someone who sees more than they say. This is the part that unnerves people the most. Healed empaths no longer need to call out the lie. The lie reveals itself simply by being in their presence. Deception dies in the same room where truth feels at home. Healed empaths don't get pulled into manipulation because they're no longer seeking validation, approval, or emotional permission from others. When you don't need someone's acceptance, you can see their behavior for what it actually is. And this is why deception cannot survive around them. The usual hooks that manipulators rely on simply don't latch onto anything. People who operate with love and honesty feel embraced by a healed empath's energy, while people who operate from emotional extraction find themselves uncomfortable, restless, or even avoidant. Not because the empath changed into someone harsh, but because the healed empath's alignment functions like a mirror. It reflects authenticity back to the authentic and distortion back to the distorted. That's the real dangerous part. Not that the healed empath attacks, but that they illuminate. Not that they punish, but that they no longer participate. Truth thrives around them, and deception dissolves. They become a sanctuary for the heart and a dead end for manipulation. A rare combination that only emerges when an empath finally steps into their full power. And if you're still here, still watching, I want to genuinely thank you. The fact that you chose to spend these minutes here means a lot to me. Empaths give so much of themselves to everyone else. So your presence here, your attention, your openness is something I truly don't take lightly. If something in this video made you feel seen, if a single idea sparked clarity or comfort, then you're already moving into the healed space you've been searching for. So as you go forward, remember this. You're not losing parts of yourself, you're reclaiming them. You're not hardening, you're aligning. And you're not walking alone, you're walking empowered. Let life meet you gently. Let your boundaries hold you. And let your healing guide you toward the version of yourself that finally feels like home. Hope is not ahead of you. It's already opening inside you.